Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Pat McCormick, president of the City Club, and I'd like to welcome members and guests alike, those of you who join us here in the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. You're in for a real treat today. Today we'll hear from Bill Schonely, one of the best-known broadcasters, sports broadcasters in history. But first, some announcements. The support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures that we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. They are essential to the vitality and sustainability of club activities. I'd like to thank our generous media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and our Friday Forum fall corporate sponsors, AARP, Portland General Electric, and Perkins Coie. We're grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. Our slate of winter corporate sponsors is complete, but we have 2 posts left for the spring sponsorships. If your company or firm would like to support City Club's mission through Friday Forum sponsorship, please contact the friendly staff at the side of the room here or call the City Club office. Next week's Friday Forum is our annual holiday show. The internationally recognized Portland State Chamber Choir will perform a musical feast, everything from classical selections to Haitian voodoo music, and of course, holiday tunes. You can learn more about future City Club events on our website at pdxcityclub.org. We'll be having a question and answer session at the end of today's program with Bill Schonely. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your question. And for all of our audience members, please locate the index cards that are at the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. We will collect them prior to the start of the question and answer period. Also on your table are feedback forms for our forum today. Please take a moment, if you would, because City Club values your input, and we want to make sure that we're putting on the best possible Friday forums. Complete the forms and the staff will collect them at the end of the forum. And now our program. You might know him better as Mr. Rip City or the Shans. You probably recognize his finest phrases like bingo bango bongo and lickety brindle up the middle. Bill Schonely is here today to share personal stories about life behind the mic with the Trailblazers. Hopefully he'll share with us why you've got to make your free throws. Bill Schonely was the voice of the Trailblazers from their birth in 1970 through the 1998 playoffs. His 30 years behind the microphone was second only to the late Chick Hearn, the legendary voice of the Los Angeles Lakers. Bill is currently serving as one of the Trailblazer family's ambassadors to the community. He was just recognized by the Basketball Hall of Fame with the prestigious Kurt Gowdy Media Award. And without further ado, please help me welcome Bill Schonely.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for the invitation to join you this afternoon. This is rather unusual for me. Normally it's a sports venue or behind the microphone somewhere in this country doing a sports broadcast, newscast. But to be here at the City Club, and I have to confess that I was a bit surprised to receive that invitation. Mr. Bill Holmer down here, he and I sing at the Lake Grove Presbyterian Church Choir, so we see one another all the time, and all of a sudden he said, "Sean's come over here, I want to talk to you." I said, "All right, how would you like to speak to the City Club?" I said, "Well, that sounds pretty good. Yes, I'll do it." But I'm apprehensive about some of the things that I might talk about because it would look like and might look like to some of you that I'm patting myself on the back, but I really don't mean that. It's life behind the microphone. I had to come up with a title, and that was it. I also have to confess there has been a time or two during my career when someone would come up to me and suggest that I should run for office, the governor, maybe a senator, How about the mayor? And there are a lot of other venues out there. I have thought about it at the time. One time, Ron Wyden, Senator Wyden, was over at the Rose Garden, and he saw me. I was preparing for a broadcast at the time. He waved. He says, "Come here, Sean." He said, "I want you to do one thing for me." "What's that?" He said, "Do not ever run against me." Well, Ron, I have something to tell you. I'm thinking about an office job someplace down the line. There are some people around the state who have come to me and said, "Hey, how would you like to run for this office or that office?" So I want to lay it on the City Club folks. I could be back here sometime. Okay? You never know. And I was talking to my wife the other day about all of this, and I did ask my wife, Dottie, one time, "Dottie, what would you think if I ran for office?" She said, "That would be very nice, Bill, as long as you don't mind running as a bachelor." So that takes care of all of that, doesn't it? Again, thank you for the invitation. I have to admit, it came as a surprise. And during my years here in Portland, I followed the history of the City Club. And you have hosted important newsmakers, government officials, political candidates, and so on. And I have attended a number of those over the years. I never imagined that you might invite a guy who has spent his career behind a microphone, broadcasting sporting events and one another. But one of the best parts of spending a career talking about sports is that there are thousands upon thousands of other folks who also like to talk about sports and who have watched or listened to me for a long, long time. And they feel that they know me. No matter where I go, Oregonians of all ages will come up and offer me their viewpoints and want to know about this and that and ask me questions. It happens each and every day. And over the years, I've come up with a list of questions I am most often asked, questions that I would bet that many of you here today might want to ask me as well. So with apologies to David Letterman, here are the top 10 questions that I have come up with that people ask me all the time. So I'm going to interview myself, okay, for the time being. This is a first. Bill, yes. How did you become interested in a broadcasting career? Well, I didn't think about it in the beginning. While going to high school and junior high school and growing up, I became involved in music. I always thought I was going to be a singer. Not necessarily Frank Sinatra type, secular music, Broadway musicals and things like that. And I really worked hard on that. Matter of fact, I got an audition from Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians. I flunked out. And Fred told that story one time at a concert when Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians were doing their thing in those days, many years ago now. And I told that story, and he said, "Mr. Shanley," after the introduction, he said, "You're not alone. Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, and a few others didn't make it either." So that was my music career. And as I said at the outset, I'm singing in a choir now and have done a lot of singing on the side. But broadcasting, in my town where I grew up, in Norristown, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you remember where that is. It's outside of Philadelphia, right near Valley Forge. And singing in a choir, a little radio station went on the air, WNAR. And it started to do some high school sporting events. I got involved. I thought, wow, this is a pretty nice gig. So I interested myself more and more as time went on. Then the United States Marine Corps came calling. I went into the Marine Corps, went down to Parris Island, South Carolina, went through about 13 weeks of basic training, and did some musical singing while there, believe it or not, shipped overseas to the South Pacific. And to make a long story short there, I was on Guam at this particular time, and a radio station, Armed Forces Radio, was there. I was doing my Marine Corps work. They came and asked me, how would you like to come up and be a broadcaster for Armed Forces Radio? Armed Forces Radio, of course, had all the military services represented. It was not only the Marine Corps. And so I went up there, and I took an audition, and they hired me right then and there. I had to get special permission from the Marine Corps to go to Armed Forces Radio. That really whetted my appetite for that. And we did everything on that radio station. I was a disc jockey, a weatherman. We did sports, all sorts of broadcasts that you can think of. And then I thought I was going to go overseas. The Korean War broke out at the time. They needed bodies, people, immediately. And I was prepared to go. I was on a list 3 different times to go to Korea from the South Pacific because the United States needed people. All 3 times, my name was taken off that list. I'll never know till my dying day why that occurred, but they shipped me back to Quantico, Virginia. And I brought many of those veterans from the Korean War back home, those who were fortunate enough to come back alive. And we did things with a lot of the broadcasters in Washington, D.C. So more and more I got myself involved. I go back to my singing. They put on Oklahoma, big, huge show on the big stage at Quantico, Virginia. If you know the story about Oklahoma, I played the part of Will Parker, the guy that just got back from Kansas City. Everything's up to date in Kansas City, you know, that type of thing. Well, it was a big affair. And again, to go down, it was a huge success. And a gentleman, a major, his wife played opposite me in this particular play. She was Ado Annie, and I was Will Parker. Well, he said, Shantz, what are you going to do when you get out of the Marine Corps? And I said, well, I don't know when I'm going to get out. At this particular time, it looked like I was going to stay in the Marine Corps. He said, well, I want you to do one thing because I think my friend down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, would like to talk to you. I said, okay. I got on a Greyhound bus, took the trip down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, saw this gentleman. His name was Tom Ferguson. And we sat down. He gave me an audition. He said, Shantz, when you get out of the Marine Corps, you've got a job right here. I went back to Quantico, Virginia. I told my wife, had 2 little kids at the time, let's go. I got out of the Marine Corps, though the Marine Corps wined and dined me. They wanted me to stay in, but I wanted to do my broadcast work. Went down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, worked at the station, radio station on one side, TV station on the other side, and all of us did everything. I ran a camera, I was the SO reporter, I was the weatherman, I was a morning disc jockey. We did high school football and basketball games, and of course, Louisiana State University, ensconced there in beautiful downtown Baton Rouge. I got to work on LSU football and basketball games, did public announcing work, even did a little wrestling announcing in those days. I can truly say I've done everything to be done in this business at least once. So that really whetted my appetite. And then about 2.5 years later, I had a chance to go to Seattle, and I did. And I suppose the rest is history there. A gentleman by the name of Keith Jackson and I started at KOMO Radio and TV in Seattle in 1955. He was a young guy, just like myself at the time, out of Washington State University, just graduated from broadcasting school. He was on the TV side, I was on the radio side, and then we both did a lot of things together and became very, very dear friends. We still are today. Everybody knows what happened to Keith Jackson. They don't know what happened to me. But he's a dear friend. That is me in a nutshell there. Bill, I have a question. All right, you're next. How did you get connected with the Portland Trail Blazers? We go back to Seattle. I had become friends with Harry Glickman, who had the Portland Buckaroos at the time, a great franchise in the dear old Western Hockey League. And I had put the Seattle Totems on radio up there. They were playing, but they didn't have a broadcast. So that happened in the early 60s, and I broadcast the Seattle Totems on radio and some on television, and Harry, of course, had the Portland Buckaroos. Now, not only in Seattle, I worked on Husky football and basketball broadcasts. I did the Totems. I did some National Hockey League games for the West Coast. CBS TV were doing those games about once a week, 5, 6, 7, 8 times on a Sunday afternoon, the National Hockey League. I got to do some of those. I did the California Golden Seals of the National Hockey League. Among all the other things that I was doing, then I got involved in baseball. The Pacific Coast League. I did some of the games the last year of the Seattle Rainiers, if you remember, before they became the Seattle Angels, that Gene Autry owned. I was working for a station that Gene Autry owned in Seattle. Now, doing all the other things, they did the Husky broadcast and the hockey and the Coast League baseball. We go ahead a few years. City of Seattle got a Major League Baseball franchise, the Seattle Pilots, if you remember. They didn't last too long, but I worked with a guy by the name of Jimmy Dudley, who was a longtime broadcaster, one of the great old-time broadcasters. He worked for the Cleveland Indians for years. In his 20th year, he decided to pack it up in those days, but he said, I may have some more baseball in me. He was a little guy from West Virginia. His tagline was always, so long and lots of good luck, you hear? He and I did the Seattle Pilots of the American League. The city of Seattle did not have a big enough stadium to handle the crowds. They had old Sick Seattle Stadium. Mr. Sick owned a brewery up there, of course, Rainier Brewery. And they could only put enough planks of wood in the outfield of dear old Sick Seattle Stadium to raise about 25,000 people. Well, the now commissioner of baseball, Mr. Bud Selig, had lost his Braves from Milwaukee to become the Atlanta Braves. He had an empty stadium. Bud Selig and the commissioner of the American League, Bud Cronin, got together with the rest of the American League owners and took that franchise away from the city of Seattle. They became the Milwaukee Brewers. Harry Glickman found out that I was available. We had become friends. He called me down to Portland. We sat down in his office over in the Lloyd Building across town. We talked for about 5 minutes. We shook hands, and that was 43 years ago. I had no idea at any time that I was ever going to wind up doing NBA basketball, because in my early broadcasting career, I was doing everything else but the NBA. Now look what happened. We come down to Portland. One of the first things that Harry Glickman said to me in his deep baritone voice, Sean, I want you to put a radio network together. I said, okay. I got to check out on some TV and get us some sponsors so we get this thing going. I said, okay. Well, we did that. I was the sixth man hired by Harry in those days, and I owe most everything in my broadcasting career to Harry Glickman. In the early days, the ownership of the Portland Trailblazers. I bleed Trailblazer red and have and always will. I know we've had our ups and downs. We've had a championship. And speaking of that, I wear a ring on my right hand here, which signifies the World's Championship. People ask me about that, and I always say, well, I want to stick around till they get another one. They better hurry up. And I think they will. Bill, what was it like to broadcast the 1976-77 championship season? Well, it was only the 7th year in existence of the Portland Trail Blazers. And all of a sudden, Jack Ramsay comes on the scene. Bill Walton comes out of UCLA. And Lionel Hollins, David Twardzik, Bobby Gross, you can go, Larry Steele, right on down the line. The year before, Lenny Wilkins was our coach, and we had a terrible time, mostly because Bill Walton at the time was always injured, if you recall, coming out of school, and he had a terrible time. I'll get back to Walton in a moment. So things blended very well for Jack Ramsay and the franchise. It didn't start out great, but about the middle of the season, something happened to turn that thing around, and the momentum gathered and gathered, limped into the playoffs that year, but took the Chicago Bulls 2 out of 3, took 6 from the Denver Nuggets, went down to Los Angeles, won 4 straight over the Lakers. Now, all of a sudden, this area, this town, this state, the Northwest was going nuts with basketball fever. In the finals, back to Philadelphia, lose the first 2 games. Come back to Portland, thousands and thousands of people at the airport. Win the next 2 games, tie the series. Back to Philadelphia again, Walton and crew and Maurice Lucas and the rest of that gang. What a wonderful group of people they were. Annihilated Philadelphia and Dr. J. Come back that Sunday afternoon in June, and CBS was televising at the time, and they said they wanted to start the game at a certain time because they were doing the Kemper Golf Open on CBS at the time. And they wanted to start it real early. And Harry Glickman said, no way. They wanted to start it at 11 a.m. in the morning. Harry said, we're not going to start till at least 12:30 in the afternoon. Harry won out. Well, by about 9 minutes after 2 that afternoon, the Portland Trail Blazers were #1, and they were the world champions. And I was so proud to be a part of that. This place was just a wonderful place to be at the time. Another question. Where did the term Rip City come from? In the early days, first year of our broadcast, I was trying to come up with a phrase that would be synonymous not only with the team, but my broadcast, a signature of some kind. You know, if you're writing a book, you have your open and you have your close and you have some key things that you say. Well, I was trying to do that. I always try to tell the story of that game without going hog wild all the time, as a lot of these young guys do today. There's always a story in a basketball game or any sporting event, the beginning, the middle, and the end. But I could not come up with a signature phrase. The Los Angeles Lakers come to Portland's Memorial Coliseum for the first time, down by 25, 26 points to Rudy LaRusso and Wilt Chamberlain and all the rest of that crew at the time, Gail Goodrich. All of a sudden, the game changed. The momentum changed again. We get down to the point where the next basket by Portland, we had one of our first big crowds over there, about around 10,000, maybe slightly more than that. They were going crazy. Get to the point where the next basket by Portland would tie the mighty Lakers. Jimmy Barnett played at the University of Oregon, now a broadcaster for the California basketball franchise. He was a flake then. He's still a flake today, but he's a nice guy. In this day and age, it would have been a three-point play. He came over the midcourt line. We were sitting at midcourt at the time. Hardly any media were there. Nobody was really sitting in the end zones. It was bones bare, if you will, but the rest of the building was filled. Barney came right in front of me, and whatever he was going to do, he just unloaded a shot. Why he took the shot, I'll never know. I was absolutely flabbergasted. But as the ball was in flight and it was going to go in, I brought him out of backcourt, right to midcourt. He took the shot, and lo and behold, it went in. And for whatever reason, I came out with Rip City. All right. Well, the crowd is going nuts, and I had to give a commercial cue because the Lakers called a timeout. Bill Sharman was the head coach at the time. I gave my commercial cue, sat back in my chair, and the guys around me, they said, "Rip City." I said, "Yeah, leave that in." So that has become a phrase, Rip City. It means something good. I never overused the word at all, but on key occasions I've always used it. And now around the country, this franchise and this town is Rip City. I was inducted into the National Basketball Hall of Fame, as many of you might know, this past summer. A writer from the Chicago Tribune went in with me, and he called me on the phone, and we had known one another, and I congratulated him, and he congratulated me, and he said, "Sean, you're the only broadcaster I know that has a town named after him." But the media has been very, very nice, and that's the story in a nutshell. Where am I getting for time, sir? Pat? Oh, I'm okay. Well, let's go to another question that somebody asked me then. Is it true that you once punched a loudmouth fan? Yes, I did. I'm not too proud of it, but I did punch a guy out. And I was doing the Seattle Totems of the Western Hockey League. We were in the Western Conference playoffs down at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. And my little broadcast position was at mid-ice, and people were sitting around me. And there was a guy over to my right shoulder that had a siren. San Francisco was winning this game. The Blazers went on to win the series. But on this particular night, San Francisco came out, and they finally won the game. But all night long, he was grinding this siren. So now I get into my post-game show. He walks over behind me. It's behind my right ear. No wonder I'm deaf over here. And grinded that siren while I'm trying to do my post-game show and recap the story of the game. And finally, I have a boiling point. I'm getting red. I'm frustrated. I'm getting to the point. I gave a commercial cue, and I said, "Somebody's going to get a knuckle sandwich." I gave the cue. I turned around and got up, and I whopped him good. And they haul him out of there. I'm not proud of that, but that did happen. Yeah. I must admit it felt good. Where did the term lickety-brindle come from? Well, back in Pennsylvania, up in the Pennsylvania Dutch country, on the weekends, my mother and father would take myself and my two brothers, and after church, well, we'd go up to a little town called Ole, Pennsylvania, not far from Reading, Pennsylvania. If you were back there, you'd know that particular area. Not too far from Philadelphia, maybe 35 miles. And my uncle had two brindle little dogs, and I was just young at this time. And he would play with them on the lawn, and the dogs were happy to see me and my family and so forth. And they would run all over the place, and my uncle would always say, "Lickety-brindle, look at them go, lickety-brindle." Well, that stuck. Now, when I was doing hockey, I used that phrase every once in a while. A hockey player would come out of backcourt with the puck, and he'd weave his way down, and he'd go in, and he'd shoot, and maybe he'd score, and maybe it would be a save, but I would throw in lickety-brindle. I did it sometimes on baseball. I started to do it in basketball. Now, the guy who did it most was a guy by the name of Dave Twardzik. If you remember David, I nicknamed him Pinball. But he would get the ball out maybe like at the top of the key or halfway between midcourt and the top of the key. He was a little guy, and he was not afraid to mix it up with the big boys. And he would go up the middle and lay it up and in. Lickety-brindle up the middle. That's how that started. It's a crazy world, I know this. Let's see. Bill, who is your all-time favorite trailblazer? if I get that once a day, I get it 10 times a day from people. That's awfully hard to do. But I'll throw out one name for sure, and he was our first man to be picked, Jeff Petrie, who in his day could shoot, flat out shoot, might have been the best of all time. It would have been a three-point shot for him in those days, or if he was ended his career. Injuries stopped him, and he's gone on to be a general manager, and he's running the scene down there in Sacramento and doing a great job. He's married, he's a grandfather now, I can hardly believe that. He was one of my broadcasting partners for a number of years. I'm very proud of him. But to pick out an all-time trailblazer, I would have to say Jeff Petrie. But I could name so many: Maurice Lucas, and Terry Porter, and Bill Walton, and Dave Twardzik, and Lloyd Neal, some people from our first team. So many names. I became good friends, and I try and stay in touch with them as best I can. They will call me, I will call them, and it's just hard to say who is my all-time favorite. And finally, for this guy, whoever he is who's asking me the questions here, the newest question, Bill: did you ever in your wildest dreams think you would be inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame? No, I did not. I had no idea that that was going to occur. I was just a broadcaster, just like a writer is, doing the job assigned to me and to them. That's what we do. Tried to be a storyteller as best I could. And wherever I go around the state, people remind me of certain situations that happened in a game many, many years ago. That's very flattering. I've always tried to get involved in our community, and I think I have. They have Bill's Kids over the Providence Child Center named for me. That's one of my big jobs that I'm very proud of. Those are the medically fragile children that need 24-hour-a-day care. And they've done a marvelous job with those kids over there. It just amazes me that these children are put on the earth where most of us have children who can run and sing and play and do so many other things, and these kids can't do anything. But you go over there and you can get them to smile, and you try and help them out as best you can. That's what I tried to do. People were very nice to me, and I want to give back. So I thank you for having me here today. I believe there's going to be some other questions, Pat, but thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. If you haven't exhausted all the potential questions, and you still have a reservoir of great answers as you've shared so far, we'll appreciate that. It's now time for our question and answer period. If you have a written question on an index card, if you'd please hold it up high so that the City Club staff can collect it. Thank you very much.
Don't make them too tough now. I've been to this City Club before, so
whatever. The first question of our speaker, as always, will be from today's Friday Forum host, Mac Prichard. Mac is the founder and president of Prichard Communications, a public relations and social media firm. Mac joined the City Club in 2004, served on the Agora Committee for 2 years, and joined the Board of Governors in 2010. Mac?
Thank you for that presentation, Bill, and those hard-hitting questions. There are many people out there who are not sports fans who know you from your work in the community, and particularly there's a video that you did earlier this year that went viral and is approaching almost 1 million views on YouTube. So you're a YouTube star. It's called Teach You How to Brushy.
Yeah, brushy, brushy.
Yes, and it's been on the Today Show, popped up on the Huffington Post, and I'm just curious. Two quick questions. One, why oral hygiene? And then secondly, how do you choose the community projects that you do and get involved in?
Well, I get a lot of requests to do so many things, and I have a tough time saying no. Well, this is to teach kids how to brush their teeth properly and take care of themselves. So they asked me, they asked Jerome Kersey to be involved in this little film. It took a little while to get it done, but it goes by so fast. But as I understand, yes, it has been shown everywhere. So if these kids now brush their teeth the correct way, we made it. Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Edward Hershey. I'm a City Club member. Thank you for being here, Bill.
Thank you, Edward.
I think everybody appreciates that, unlike a network announcer, a hometown sportscaster is part of the organization and comes at the game from that perspective. But surely there are times when circumstances on the court require the delivery of bad news. Most recently, for instance, last year when the sportscasters here had to deal with what Raymond Felton was doing on the court for the Blazers. I'm wondering how you handle that, how you balance it, and if you have an anecdote or two about when those situations came up, how you solved the dilemma of representing the organization but imparting bad news to the listeners.
Well, I always tried, if things like that would occur in front of me and we're doing a live broadcast, to stay away from some of that, because that takes away from the story of the game, whether the Blazers are going to win or going to lose it. And I'll let some of those things that come up and are headlines to somebody else. I will comment on them if I can, but I just did not ever want to get away from the story of the game, because some of those things might happen in a game, a little fight or so forth, or people jawing at one another, and find out about that after the game. So that's what I always try to do. I hope that's a decent answer. So.
I neglected to mention to folks that it is time for the question and answer period from the members on the floor. If you do have additional questions, it's a good time to be holding them up so that the staff can collect them. Asking questions at the Friday Forum is a privilege of City Club membership, and we ask that you ask your question as directly as possible. If I flash this little question mark, it's time for you to wrap up the question so we can get on with additional questions. Thank you very much. Next.
Felisa Hagan, City Club member.
Yes.
Our table collectively would like to know what's the worst coaching decision you believe you've seen in your life at the Blazers?
The worst. Oh, boy. That's an excellent question, but I have to stop and think about that. Well, I thought at the time, one of the worst, maybe not so much coaching decision, but I was devastated myself when the organization, and I understand it more now than I ever did then, was letting Lenny Wilkens go as a coach, if that makes sense. And then the next year, Jack Ramsey came on, and my gosh, they won a championship. And Lenny had all but Maurice Lucas and Dave Twardzik and Lionel Hollins on that team, and those three people came on, and they had a healthy Bill Walton. I just thought at the time maybe Lenny might have gotten a raw deal. But so many things happen throughout the course of a game, and you see it happen. How about decisions by the officials? The referees, night in and night out sometimes. No, I know them all, and I love them, but it's just part of the game. That's my answer for that, if it works. Yes?
Ted Kay, City Club member.
Yeah.
In today's Oregonian, columnist John Consano devotes his entire column giving advice to Paul Allen.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Paul Allen asked you for advice right now, what advice you would give him?
Well, I'll tell you. I try and stay away from those things. Dear John over there, he gets off on a tangent every once in a while. There are changes going to be made right now in our organization, but there are changes every day out at Nike or at Fred Meyer or anyplace else. The Blazers are front page headlines, and it's not as bad as you might think at all. It's not. It's going to be okay, in my opinion. Yes, sir, Commissioner.
Steve Novick, City Club member.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. Shanley, I just want to tell you that my family moved to Oregon when I was 10 in 1973, and it was listening to your broadcast that made me first feel like an Oregonian, made me feel at home. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
My question for you is, if Cliff Robinson had caught the ball, or if Jerome Kersey had kept it and dunked it, could the Blazers have beaten the Bulls in the finals that year, or would they have been doomed to lose to Michael Jordan anyway?
Well, they had one guy. You just mentioned his name. Yes, they probably could have won right then and there, but Michael Jordan did it all. And he not only did it to the Trailblazers, he did it to every adversary that he ever played against, and just could not do anything about that, Steve. That would have been nice. I know the Blazers came close 2 out of 3 times in that early 90s. That's true. Yes, sir.
Greg McPherson, City Club member. Bill, since you broadcast both in the Memorial Coliseum and in the Rose Garden, could you comment on the difference in atmosphere between the 2 facilities in broadcasting a game?
Well, it was so lively over at the Memorial Coliseum. Everybody was closer to the action there, the way the building was put together. We had so many thrilling times over there. Our building at the Rose Quarter, my gosh, it gets lively upon occasion. That crowd, it doesn't seem to be as loud. Less people at Memorial Coliseum. But the atmosphere, it was just sensational over there. Every new building has its little problems with the sound. I personally think the Rose Garden could be a little bit better, but I know everybody tries. They do the best job they can with that. That's my answer to that. I love the old Memorial Coliseum. Terrific.
Bill, Steve Lynn, City Club member.
Yeah.
This is a follow-up to that question. If you were the mayor, your wife would have let you. What would you have done with the Memorial Coliseum?
I had to fix it up.
All right.
The old lady needs some tender, loving care, Take care of her. I think this city could use both buildings. There are a lot of venues that come into town and sporting events. You can use both buildings. I personally would hate to see Memorial Coliseum torn down. That's my opinion. Now I'm getting into politics. How much time do I have, Pat?
Oh, you have plenty of time left, Bill.
Well-
you can get into politics if you like.
Well, I just want to end it here with this. This is December the 7th, 1941, 71 years ago. I'm a Marine Corps vet, history buff in that regard from time to time. And I love the men and women who serve in our armed forces. We have a lot of them here in the state, as you are well aware. It's holiday time right now. And we should think more and more about them, the ones that are still overseas and can't come home. And at this holiday season, there's a little poem that was written by Lance Corporal James M. Schmidt a few years ago. I'm going to recite it for you. I want you to listen to each and every word as best you can. I want you to know that this is Santa Claus talking, not me. It's Santa Claus. 'Twas the night before Christmas. He lived alone in a one-bedroom house made of plaster and stone. I had come down the chimney with presents to give and to see just who in this home did live. I looked all about. A strange sight I did see. No tinsel, no presents, not even a tree. No stocking by mantle, just boots filled with sand. And on the wall, pictures of far distant lands. With medals and badges and awards of all kinds, a sobering thought came to my mind. For this house was different, so dark and so dreary, the home of a soldier. Now I could see clearly. The soldier lay sleeping, silent, alone, curled up on the floor in this one-bedroom home. The face was so gentle, the room in such disorder, not how I pictured a United States soldier. Was this the hero of whom I just read, curled up on a poncho, the floor for a bed? I realized the families that I saw this night owed their lives to these soldiers who were willing to fight. Soon round the world, the children would play and grown-ups would celebrate a bright Christmas day. They all enjoyed freedom each month of the year because of the soldiers like the one lying here. I couldn't help wonder how many lay alone on a cold Christmas Eve in a land far from home. The very thought brought a tear to my eye, and I dropped to my knees and I started to cry. The soldier awakened, and I heard a rough voice, "Santa, don't cry. This life is my choice. I fight for freedom. I don't ask for more. My life is my God, my country, my core." The soldier rolled over and soon drifted to sleep. I couldn't control it. I continued to weep. I kept watch for hours, so silent and still, and we both shivered from the cold evening's chill. I didn't want to leave on that cold, dark night. This guardian of honor so willing to fight. Then the soldier rolled over, and with a voice soft and pure, he whispered, "Carry on, Santa. It's Christmas Day. All is secure." One look at my watch, and I knew he was right. Merry Christmas, my friend, and to all, a good night. Thank you.
We have run out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. Please join us next week as we spark a discussion about the future of music and music education while we listen to the music of the Portland State Chamber Choir. And as we close today, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to today's speaker, Bill Schonely, an icon for Oregon.